Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most significant and, frankly, terrifying scientific endeavors in history.
The Manhattan Project.
The Manhattan Project. You probably heard of it, but the sheer scale and drama behind this race to create the atomic bomb,
It's something else.
it really is something else.
What's captivating, I think, is how this story begins.
Oh.
Not with some grand declaration, but with a whisper of fear.
A whisper of fear. Okay, set the scene for us.
It's 1938,
Okay.
and scientists in Germany,
Okay.
Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann,
Uh-huh.
discover nuclear fission.
They split the atom.
They've split the atom.
Yeah.
Now imagine the immediate chill that runs down everyone's spine.
Oh, yeah.
If we can do this,
Right.
Nazi Germany can too.
Suddenly, World War II is looming, and the prospect of Hitler armed with atomic bombs,
Exactly.
that's not just a bad dream.
It's a global nightmare.
It's a global nightmare.
And this fear, this dreadful possibility becomes the spark that ignites the Manhattan Project.
So how does the United States actually get moving? It's not like they had a blueprint for building an atomic bomb just lying around.
Well, the early U.S. efforts were quite small scale.
Mhm.
They were hampered by limited funding
Sure.
resources
Yeah.
and, frankly, uncertainty.
Yeah.
Nobody knew for sure if an atomic bomb was even possible.
It must have felt like groping in the dark knowing that the stakes were astronomically high.
Oh, absolutely.
So where did this early, somewhat hesitant research take place?
One pivotal location was Columbia University.
Okay.
That's where Enrico Fermi, a truly remarkable physicist,
Yeah.
and his team achieved the first nuclear fission reaction in the Americas.
Wow.
They essentially mirrored what Hahn and Strassmann had done in Germany,
Uh-huh.
but now on U.S. soil.
That was
It
it.
was a critical demonstration.
Yeah.
Yes, this terrifying power could be replicated, but now
Yeah.
it was in the hands of the Allies.
But it's not just an American story, right? I remember reading about significant British involvement.
Absolutely. The British had their own atomic research program running,
Mm-hmm.
and initially they were actually further ahead than the Americans.
Hold on. The British were ahead. That's not how the story usually goes.
It's true.
How did that influence the Manhattan Project?
Well, the British had a group of scientists called the MIUD Committee,
Okay.
and they produced a document that proved to be pivotal,
Okay.
the Frisch-Peierls Memorandum.
The first Peierls Memorandum.
This memo laid out in rather stark terms the feasibility of building an atomic bomb.
Oh, wow.
It was a wake-up call for the Americans, pushing them to drastically ramp up their own efforts.
So it sounds like the British research acted as a catalyst.
Yes,
Suddenly, it wasn't just a theoretical possibility. It was a very real
absolutely.
and very urgent race against time.
Exactly.
But who was steering the ship for the Americans? Who was in charge of this immense and incredibly secretive project?
That's where two fascinating figures enter the scene.
Oh, okay.
General Leslie Groves,
Okay.
a no-nonsense military man, is put in charge of the project's overall management.
So think logistics security, keeping things on track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have J. Robert Oppenheimer,
Oh.
a brilliant, some might even say enigmatic physicist,
Right.
chosen to lead the scientific efforts at Los Alamos.
The no-nonsense military leader and the brilliant, perhaps unconventional scientist.
The fascinating combination.
Sounds like a recipe for some fascinating and probably tense interactions.
Oh, there were definitely clashes of personality and approach.
Yeah.
But what's remarkable is that their differences, those contrasting viewpoints, actually contributed to their effectiveness as a team.
Interesting.
They were both indispensable to the project's ultimate success.
I can only imagine the pressure they must have
With
felt.
immense pressure.
So where exactly did they set up shop for this top-secret, world-altering operation? Was it all happening in one place?
That's where the scale of the Manhattan Project becomes truly mind-boggling.
Oh,
We're
sure.
talking multiple massive sites
Right.
spread across the country,
Wow.
each dedicated to a specific aspect of this incredibly complex undertaking.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Right?
Where were these locations and what was happening at each one?
First, you have Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
This is where they focused on uranium enrichment.
Okay.
Think of it as trying to sift through tons of sand to find those few precious grains of gold.
Okay.
They needed to isolate the rare and highly fissile uranium-235 isotope
Right.
from the much more common and essentially inert uranium-238.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how daunting this whole project must have been.
Oh, it was a monumental undertaking.
But Oak Ridge was just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, right. Okay, then you have Hanford, Washington.
Hanford, Washington.
Hanford's purpose was plutonium production.
Wait a minute, plutonium? I thought the bombs used uranium.
Well, it turns out they use both.
Oh.
Plutonium emerged as a viable alternative for fueling an atomic bomb.
Okay.
And the reactors built at Hanford were specifically designed to create this element, which doesn't exist in nature in usable quantities.
So Oak Ridge for uranium enrichment.
Yes.
Hanford for plutonium production.
That's right.
What about the bombs themselves? Where was the actual design and assembly taking place?
That brings us to a place you've probably heard of, shrouded in secrecy.
Los
Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Alamos.
Hidden away in the mountains, this was the secret laboratory where Oppenheimer and his team were grappling with the incredibly complex task of figuring out how to translate these radioactive materials, these grains of uranium and plutonium, into actual working weapons.
It sounds like a scene straight out of a spy thriller.
It was a high-stakes operation.
These sprawling secret sites, the pressure, the race against time.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing that most of the people working on this project had no idea what they were truly a part of, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people working on the Manhattan Project were compartmentalized. They knew their specific tasks, but they were kept in the dark about the ultimate goal.
Wow.
Secrecy was paramount.
This is already a gripping story, and we've only just scratched the surface. To our listeners, hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on the rest of this incredible journey into the heart of the Manhattan Project.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. All right, we've established these 3 massive clandestine sites,
Yep.
Oak Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos,
Uh-huh.
all humming with activity.
Right.
But let's zoom in a bit,
Okay.
get into the nitty-gritty science at the heart of it all.
Okay.
Splitting an atom, building a bomb.
Right.
It wasn't just a matter of mixing ingredients, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. From everything I've read, it sounds like an undertaking of, well, almost unimaginable complexity.
It was a truly Herculean effort.
So where do we even begin?
Let's return to Oak Ridge
Okay.
and the monumental challenge of isotope separation.
Right.
Remember, natural uranium is predominantly that heavier U-238 isotope.
Yeah.
Only a tiny fraction, less than 1%, is the fissile U-235 they needed for the bomb.
Right. Like finding a needle in a haystack, but on an atomic scale.
Ex-
So how did they even approach separating something that's essentially the same element, just with this tiny difference in weight?
They explored several methods, each with its own mind-blowing complexities.
Okay.
One was gaseous diffusion.
Gaseous diffusion.
Picture a massive building, the K-25 plant,
Okay.
filled with porous membranes. They'd pump uranium hexafluoride gas,
Uranium hexafluoride gas.
the only gaseous compound of uranium
Right.
through these membranes.
Okay.
The lighter U-235 would pass through slightly faster,
Okay.
leading to a very, very gradual enrichment.
Okay. So it's like a super slow and delicate filtering process on an industrial scale.
You could say that.
What other methods did they try?
Another was electromagnetic separation using gigantic devices called calutrons.
Calotrons.
Essentially, they used magnetic fields to separate the isotopes based on their slight difference in mass.
So a giant magnet essentially pulling the U-235 away from the U-238.
In essence, yes.
Were there any major challenges with that approach?
Well, imagine thousands of these calutrons running 234...
Wow. Consuming an enormous amount of energy.
Yeah.
They needed an army of operators, many of them women,
Yeah.
to constantly monitor and adjust these machines.
Wow.
It was a massive logistical and technical undertaking.
It's hard to even fathom the scale of the operation.
It was truly unprecedented.
Did they have any other tricks up their sleeves for this isotope separation puzzle?
They did. They also employed a third method called thermal diffusion.
Thermal diffusion.
They'd create a temperature gradient in these tall columns filled with uranium hexafluoride.
Okay.
The lighter U-235 would tend to concentrate at the top.
Wow, so they really threw everything they could at this problem.
They were determined to succeed.
And here's the ingenious part.
Yes.
They used the slightly enriched uranium from one method as the input for another, boosting the overall enrichment levels step by step.
That's right.
This cascading approach was crucial for reaching the necessary levels of U-235.
Exactly.
So Oak Ridge was this sprawling complex dedicated to producing weapons-grade uranium.
But what about Hanford? That was all about plutonium.
Right, correct.
And plutonium doesn't just exist in nature.
It does not.
They had to create it.
They did.
Wow.
They constructed massive nuclear reactors at Hanford for that specific purpose.
Okay.
They'd bombard natural uranium with neutrons, triggering a process that would eventually produce plutonium-239.
So they're essentially cooking up plutonium inside these reactors.
In a sense, yes.
But how do they actually get the plutonium out?
That required a whole other complex process.
Oh.
Chemical separation.
Okay.
After irradiating the uranium fuel rods in the reactor,
Yeah.
they had to be chemically processed to extract the plutonium.
Okay.
It was a highly dangerous undertaking,
I bet.
working with intensely radioactive and toxic materials.
So every step from start to finish involved incredible risks.
There were dangers at every turn.
Were there any major setbacks or surprises along the way?
As a matter of fact, the first reactors at Hanford were initially designed incorrectly.
Wait, they messed up? How did that happen?
Well, they didn't fully understand the behavior of certain fission products,
Okay.
but specifically xenon-135.
Xenon-135.
It was absorbing so many neutrons that it was effectively shutting down the reactor.
Oh no. That sounds like a major crisis.
It was a significant setback.
Did they have to scrap the whole reactor and start over?
Thankfully, no.
Right.
Enrico Fermi, ever the brilliant problem solver,
Right.
figured out a workaround.
Okay.
They loaded the reactor with even more uranium fuel rods than initially planned,
Okay.
essentially overpowering the xenon poisoning.
That's incredible. Talk about thinking on your feet under immense pressure.
It was a testament to their ingenuity.
So they're producing uranium at Oak Ridge,
Yes.
plutonium at Hanford,
Right.
both incredibly challenging endeavors.
Absolutely.
But how do you turn these radioactive elements into an actual weapon?
That was the monumental task facing the team at Los Alamos, led by Oppenheimer.
Okay.
And it's here that two distinct bomb designs emerged.
Okay.
Little Boy and Fat Man.
Little Boy and Fat Man. Okay, those names are certainly memorable.
They are rather evocative, aren't they?
What were the key differences between them?
Little Boy, the uranium bomb, was a relatively straightforward gun-type design.
Okay.
They would fire a subcritical piece of uranium-235 into another, creating a supercritical mass and triggering the nuclear explosion.
So like firing a bullet into a target, but on an atomic scale?
A very simplified way to put it, yes.
Right.
But Fat Man, the plutonium bomb, was a completely different story.
Okay.
Because of plutonium's unique properties, the gun-type method wouldn't work.
Why not? What was different about plutonium?
Plutonium has a much higher rate of spontaneous fission.
Spontaneous fission.
If they tried the gun-type approach, the bomb would likely pre-detonate, fizzle out before reaching its full explosive yield.
So they needed a different approach for Fat Man.
Yes.
Something more sophisticated.
Exactly. They came up with the implosion method.
Implosion. So instead of pushing things together, they're pulling them in.
In essence, yes. Okay. Fat Man used precisely shaped explosives arranged around a plutonium core.
Okay.
When detonated, these explosives would create a powerful inward shock wave, compressing the plutonium sphere into a much denser supercritical state.
So they were essentially squeezing the plutonium from all sides to trigger the explosion.
Precisely.
Wow.
But the implosion method was incredibly complex, both technically and from an engineering standpoint.
I can imagine. Trying to perfectly synchronize a spherical shockwave using explosives.
A formidable challenge.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It was. It took years of research testing and countless brilliant minds to figure out how to make it work.
So they're developing these two radically different bomb designs racing against time.
The stakes couldn't have been higher.
But before they could even consider using them, they needed to test them right.
Of course.
To prove that these theoretical weapons actually worked.
A crucial step.
And that brings us to one of the most iconic and consequential events in human history.
The Trinity test.
Trinity, the first atomic bomb test.
Right.
This is where things take on a whole new level of tension and dread, isn't it?
It certainly is.
So take us there. Take us to the New Mexico desert, to that moment in July 1945 when the world changed forever.
It's July 16th, 1945, 5:30 in the morning.
Okay.
The setting is the Jornada del Muerto desert in New Mexico.
Jornada del Muerto.
Perched atop a steel tower sits the device they called the Gadget,
Okay.
a prototype of the Fat Man plutonium bomb.
So picture this.
Yes.
It's the dead of night.
Uh-huh.
A group of scientists and military personnel are huddled in bunkers miles away.
Right.
They're about to detonate the first atomic bomb in history.
A momentous occasion.
What's the atmosphere like? Can you describe it?
There's this palpable tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation, excitement, anxiety, even fear. Many of them had poured years of their lives into this project. And this was a culmination of all their efforts, the moment of truth.
And then that's sure.
Yeah.
What happens?
A blinding flash, more intense than anything anyone had ever witnessed. A massive shockwave tears through the desert, knocking some observers to the ground.
I bet that got their attention. What did they see?
Then slowly, majestically, a mushroom cloud begins to rise, growing miles high, reaching into the stratosphere.
An image that has been seared into our collective memory ever since. It must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying.
It was a truly profound and unsettling sight, a display of power unlike anything the world had ever seen.
And there's that famous, if slightly disputed story about Oppenheimer's reaction. Quoting from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Right. Whether those were his exact words at that moment is debated, but it certainly reflects the gravity of their achievement. They had created a weapon of unimaginable destructive power.
Trinity was a success. The bomb worked. But now they faced an even more daunting question. What to do with this terrifying new power?
Indeed, less than a month after Trinity, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, effectively ending World War II.
It's a decision that continues to be debated and scrutinized. Was it truly necessary to use these weapons to end the war? What about the long-term consequences, both for Japan and for the world?
Those are questions historians and ethicists continue to grapple with. The Manhattan Project isn't just a story of scientific and engineering achievement. It's a story about the choices we make as humans, the consequences of those choices, and the profound responsibility that comes with wielding such immense power.
And it's a story with a complex legacy. While the development of the atomic bomb led to unimaginable destruction, it also paved the way for advancements in nuclear medicine, energy production, and countless other fields.
It's a reminder that even the most groundbreaking discoveries can have both positive and negative implications. The impact of the Manhattan Project continues to reverberate to this day.
The Manhattan Project is a story that makes you think, that makes you question, that stays with you long after you've heard it.
It's a story that forces us to confront the complexities of human nature, our capacity for both innovation and destruction, and the enduring challenge of harnessing our knowledge for the betterment of humankind.
But that's the heart of Tell Me More, exploring the complexities of history, the stories that have shaped our world, and the lessons we can learn from them.
So until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep telling me more.
That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share this deep dive with your friends. Until next time, keep exploring the world and all its fascinating stories.